Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Secretary Mayorkas, let me run through some quick numbers of things that are just requests that we have outstanding, trying to be able to get additional information. None of this should be difficult, but we're just trying to figure out and get our hands around what's happening with the refugees and parolees that are coming from Afghanistan. So just some quick things that we want to be able to follow up on. I'm not expecting you to answer right now, but we do need to follow up on it. We understand from the administration over 100,000 people have been evacuated from Afghanistan. We've heard a second number that 37,500 are actually coming into the United States and going through process. We don't know the remaining, where they're going, who they are they coming here or not? We don't know the breakdown of refugees and parolees. We don't know the breakdown of SIVs, the special immigrant visas, and what are called partial SIV immigrant visas, or folks that were American citizens and green card holders. There's some very basic pieces of information that we keep trying to be able to get. We cannot get at this point. We're also trying to get information about, for individuals that come into the United States, that go through the vetting process, that fail the vetting process, what will happen to them, or for individuals that come in as parolees but then commit criminal acts, what will happen to those individuals? We already have reports of some of the locations where some Afghan parolees are being held, that there's been some sexual assaults that have happened in those locations, and we're trying to get more information about that and to find out what happens to those individuals and where things go. None of those should be unrealistic questions. Those all should be data points that should be coming to you, and want to know if we can get those and how quickly we can get those.
May I share some of that data with you?
Yes.
Senator, so over 60,000 individuals have been brought to the United States after screening and vetting. There are approximately 12,000 Afghan evacuees located in the transit third countries.
Mr. Secretary, your microphone, I think, is off.
I apologize. Of the over 60,000 individuals who've been brought into the United States, and I will give you approximate figures and I will verify them. Approximately 7% have been United States citizens. Approximately 6% have been lawful permanent residents. Approximately 3% have been individuals who are in receipt of their special immigrant visas. The balance of that population are individuals whose applications have not yet been processed for approval, who may qualify as SIVs and have not yet applied, who qualify or would qualify, I should say, as P1 or P2 refugees, who have been employed by the United States government in Afghanistan and are otherwise vulnerable Afghan nationals, such as journalists, human rights advocates, et cetera.
Right, but those individuals, we just need to know how their vetting process is going. This goes back to Senator Johnson's question earlier. How are we getting a positive idea on who this person is, not just say they're not on the terrorist watch list, so they must be okay? Do we really know this is a journalist? Do we really know what's the connection point on it? There's also a very odd request that came in. By the way, thank you for the data on that. We'll follow up on the rest. There's an odd request that came from OMB. OMB asked Congress to include in the CR that's coming up next week, asked Congress to waive all grounds of inadmissibility for Afghan parolees. I have to tell you, I was a little astounded when I saw that, to say they'd like to include that in there, because the grounds for inadmissibility for Afghan parolees are things like terrorism, association with terrorist organizations, money laundering, human trafficking, drug trafficking, polygamy, prostitution, persecutor of religious or individuals based on religious or political opinion, those who have commissioned torture or extrajudicial killings. I was a little astounded that OMB asked, would you waive all these grounds and allow us to be able to move people regardless of these? Where did that request come from?
So there must be a miscommunication, because we actually deny entry. We deny admission to individuals in many of those categories.
Right, and should.
So I will have to drill down on that.
This was the request that came from OMB to start after a request to be able to put it into the continuing resolution so future parolees would not be denied based on these things. And I have to tell you, I'm a little bit confused by that, and I would tell you I would adamantly oppose withdrawing any of those, and I would assume you would as well.
And there must be some miscommunication there, Senator, and I'll look into that immediately.
Okay, well, let's follow up on that to be able to make sure that that stays clear, that Congress is not going to give up. that restriction for any of those individuals that are coming into the country. You and I have spoken before, shifting subjects on our southwest border, about MPP, that the federal courts have stepped back in and said to you, you have to reinstate the Trump policy for the migrant protection protocols and to be able to put those back in place. You told me you were going to deliver to me a timeline and the process of where that was going to go, how you were going to follow the federal courts to be able to reinstate that policy. I have not received that document yet. Where is that document and that timeline?
Senator, I owe you that timeline. The difficulty is, of course, that a predicate to the implementation of MPP, as we are required to do pursuant to court order, is our ongoing negotiations with Mexico. I do owe that to you.
Be great. I'd like to be able to see that timeline to be able to know what status we have in that. Last summer, you also told me that you were going to get to me by mid-August during our budget hearing. You were going to get to me by mid-August the ICE enforcement guideline update. That's been a preliminary document that's been sitting out there for a while that you and I have both spoken about. I don't have that final document yet. You had told me before it'd be done by mid-August. Where are we on that?
I expect to publish new guidelines by September 30th. That is my goal.
Do you expect that recent crossers will still be a priority on that?
I do.
Where are we on just enforcement for recent crossers? We had some information that we got in late last night from the ERO office saying that there's about 100, what was the final number here? 100 and, let me pull it up exactly, 107,817 individuals have been released into the United States from the ERO office with different statuses. That's been changed. That was the notice to report. That's now been changed to different notations on that. But 107,000 of those individuals, we have quite a few of those, tens of thousands, that have now not reported that would be recent crossings. One of the questions I'm going to have is, are we in pursuit of any of those individuals that did get a notice to report but then have not actually reported? Are those in the priorities, and have we actually picked up any of those folks for detention?
Senator, my understanding is of that figure, approximately 75% have indeed reported within the timeframe or are within their reporting timeframe. And as to those who have failed to report, that would qualify as an enforcement priority of ours.
Well, the best guess that we have at this point is about 28,963 as of last night are beyond their reporting time frame. That's around 29,000 people so far that have not reported, that were given a notice to report. That I just want to know, where are they, and are we actually pursuing those individuals?
Those individuals we do consider to be a priority for enforcement, Senator.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait for a second round. Mr. Mayor, of course, you have tens of thousands of people right now that are coming at the border. You have tens of thousands of people that are underneath bridges, as we've seen under several of the international bridges at this point, in the process of actually moving some of those folks out of the country. What is the process for actually relocating individuals under Title 42 authority out of that area under those bridges? You've started that process with the Haitians, but walk me through quickly in the process, because I have multiple other questions.
Yes, what we do is we look at where our capacity is at other processing centers, and this goes to an apparent miscommunication I've had with Ranking Member Portman, for which I apologize. What we do is we look at processing capacity. We then move the individuals from Del Rio as needed to ensure safety and security. We move them to the other processing centers so that they may be repatriated to Haiti or other countries from those various processing centers. We are increasing the frequency and number of the repatriation flights each day.
Okay, you expect to be able to move all of those individuals out in the next how many days?
Our goal is to do so within the next 10 days or 9 days. We expect to see dramatic results in the next 48 to 96 hours, and we'll have a far better sense in the next 2 days.
And what do you anticipate is coming at you as far as additional numbers? Because obviously this number grew exceptionally quickly of Haitians and of others from all over the world coming.
So we are watching that, Senator Lankford, very, very carefully. I do want to note that some individuals turned back yesterday by reason of our measures, which I have described in this hearing. And we're hoping that what we are doing now serves a deterrent because it backs up the words that we have spoken since the very outset, that irregular migration is not the way to enter the United States. It will not work. It is dangerous, and it creates a humanitarian challenge.
It does, and that was actually the ongoing statement of the Trump administration over and over again to say that why they put the MPP in process to discourage people from coming, doing the exact same thing that you were doing, trying to be able to get them back to their home country, apply from there. There's this false belief that I hear from some that if you're going to apply for asylum, it seems to be America is the only place in the world to apply for asylum for. So we have people from all over the world that are making their ways, paying cartels to be able to come through Mexico, to be able to come to the United States, and people have this perception that, okay, well, they're coming here because of economic reasons, of asylum, of disaster, whatever it may be. But that's not the true definition of asylum. Asylum is you go to the next safe place that you can go, not travel through 14 different countries to be able to get to a spot you want to go to. There is a way to do regular immigration where we have 1 million people a year that be able to go through that process. And that's what we would encourage individuals to do. Mr. Ray, let me ping a question to you that you and I have not spoken about before, but it's exceptionally important to me. There's been a tremendous number of individuals that are dealing drugs that have a dramatic effect on my state as they do on your home state. Much of that is coming across our southwest border. We're very aware of that. But some of that is actually being run by criminal operations inside our prisons. One of the pushes that I've had for a while has been the issue of cell phones inside of prisons. Because we see it in both state prisons and in federal prisons where we have drug cartels being literally run out of the prison still. It's one thing for a victim of crime to be able to end up and to be exposed to crime. It's another thing to realize the person that perpetrated that is still operating their gang. What can we do to actually facilitate getting cell phones out of prisons, and what kind of cooperation do we need with other agencies to clear that?
I think we have reasonably good work on that being done with federal prisons in the BOP, for example. But as you say, with state prisons, you know, it's a more of a range depending on their resources. If it's all right, I'd like to sort of take a little bit of time to think about that.
Let's do.
And maybe get back to you, and so
let's
we
keep
can
going with that
discuss it in a more
conversation. I've had this
thoughtful way.
conversation
Yeah.
with FCC and with some other folks. There's some regulatory issues that need to be done. There's some cooperation that needs to be there with multiple agencies. And I'd love to be able to maintain that conversation because this is a big issue. When you're a victim of a rape and your rapist actually contacts you by cell phone from their prison, that's got to be resolved. And if you're victims of drug crimes and you're still dealing with that in the days ahead. On the cell phone issue, and this is a different cell phone issue on this, Secretary Mayorkas, I understand that you've moved over the tracking of individuals crossing our border from an ankle monitor and are experimenting with giving individuals a cell phone. And they have to be able to check in on that cell phone once or twice a day. That the notice to report plus apparently is the term is being used. I'm not familiar with this process and trying to be able to figure out what is being done with that cell phone and what's happening if individuals don't check in, if they're given a cell phone paid for by the American public to be able to help track them. Is there a tracking device all the time where we're able to track their location constantly? If they don't check in, are we going to be able to pick those up?
Senator, if they do not check in, we make a determination based on the facts whether or not they need to be the subject of a priority enforcement action for evading law enforcement and not honoring their obligations as a condition of their release on alternatives to detention. One of the things that we are looking at is assessing the efficacy of the phones and determining whether, in fact, they are a valuable enforcement tool. And we're collecting data on that, and I would look forward to providing it to you.
How many people are in that process right now? Do you know what the size of that pilot is?
I do not, Senator. We'll get that to you.
But these are all recent crossers that are getting this, correct?
Yes, yes, they are.
So I would assume they would all follow under that priority of if they're a recent crosser and they're not checking in, then they would fall underneath that priority of we need to go scoop them up and find out why they're not checking in.
Individuals who do not fulfill their responsibilities to appear and report are considered a border security enforcement priority.
Okay, and that goes back to one of my questions before about just trying to get a good ballpark figure of how many people that fit into that priority group are actually having enforcement on them currently. I understand there's a new process on prosecutorial discretion that's being used by some of the attorneys to actually go before the court. Once folks have actually been obtained and going before the court, then attorneys for DHS and ICE are coming and saying, allow us prosecutorial discretion to be able to release this individual. Is that a new process, or is that something that's ongoing?
A prosecutorial discretion is something that has been,
That's around for a long time. I'm just talking about actually going to the court and requesting it.
I believe that has been longstanding.
Okay. We'll follow up and get additional details on this, because it's my understanding there's been, I received some recent information about 6,234 cases that have been dismissed, and then the process of those cases, once they're actually in the process, and some of them included some folks with a criminal record as well. And we're just trying to get additional information.
I look forward to providing that to you. I know that the Office of Legal Counsel within Immigration and Customs Enforcement has promulgated new guidelines for its attorneys. And if you don't have those guidelines, we'd be pleased to share them with you.
That'd be helpful. This goes back to the ICE guidelines before on detention, that we're trying to get clarity on it, that we had talked about that I needed by August. You had said I would have it by August, don't have it. What are we doing on enforcement inside of the country? What are we doing on prosecutorial enforcement? This goes back to the deterrence issues. If individuals are able to get into the country and they don't have any consequences on them, they'll continue to be able to come, whether they come across the border with a child so they can work their way through, or whether they'll find other avenues to be able to get in. If there's not enforcement, it'll continue to accelerate. So
Thank you. Thank you,
Chairman,
Senator.